Hello and very warm welcome to all of you in this edition of Public Forum. I'm Anurag Punitha with you. China is the most populous or the largest authoritarian country in the world, and like all other large states, claims that it is a multi-ethnic state. In fact, China says officially that the People's Republic of China is a united multi-ethnic state founded jointly by the people of all its ethnic groups. There are 56 ethnic groups in China, namely the Han, Mongolian, Hui, Tibetan, Uyghurs, Miao, Yi, Manchu, Kazakh, Dai, etc. But the majority of the population belongs to the Han ethnic group. According to the fourth national census conducted in 1990, of the country's total population, 91.96% belongs to the Han ethnic group, and remaining 8.04% belong to minorities, other minorities groups. But China has had a complex relationship with its minorities. There have been allegations on CCP, on Communist Party of China, that the China doesn't treat its minorities at par with the Han majority. There are credible reports that there is a racism still exists in modern China. Riots and unrest have periodically flared up in far-flung regions of country like in Tibet, in Inner Mongolia and the Xinjiang province. But more prominent persecutions and the news of persecutions come from Uyghurs and Uyghurs regions and Tibet. Human rights organization and Amnesty International have said recently that China is committing crimes against humanity in the mainland's northwestern province of Xinjiang, targeting its resident Uyghurs and Kazakh. In a 160-page report compiled by the organization's International Crisis Response Team, and they titled it like "We Were Enemies in a War," unquote. China's mass torture and persecution of the Muslims in Xinjiang are horrific. The Chinese authorities have created a dystopian hell space in the Xinjiang's Uyghur Autonomous Region. In Chinese state media, we know that Uyghurs and Tibetans are subject to typecasting. They are often labeled as either terrorists or miscreants. After taking over as a president of US, Joe Biden administration declared Chinese action in Xinjiang as a genocide. Though under pressure from last month, Communist government of the People's Republic of China announced that it would use propaganda films to publicize its ethnic minorities groups, and probably their aim is simple: to promote China as a multicultural, multi-ethnic country, and by doing so increase soft power at home and abroad. But is it a mere hoax to cheat the world community? And what will happen next? And what will happen to Chinese minorities? Will CCP ever listen or come under pressure from the world community to mend its fate? To discuss further, I've been joined by a distinguished panel today. One is from London, one is from Taipei, Taiwan, and other is from New Delhi. Let me introduce them. My first guest is from London, Dr. David R. Stroop. He is a lecturer of Chinese politics in Department of Politics, University of Manchester. My second guest is Sadia Rahman. She's pursuing PhD in international relations at National Chung Sai University in Taiwan. And she's also the volunteer at the Taiwan-India Friendly Relations. My third guest is Namrata Hasija, who is joining me from Delhi, and she is Senior Fellow at CCAS, Center for China Analysis and Studies. Thank you to all my guests for joining me. And Namrata is also working on the Chinese aggression on India as well. I would begin my discussion with Dr. Stroop to you. How do you think China has created, the report says that China has created a dystopian hell space in the Xinjiang Uyghur region, and probably is constantly trying to stamp out the religious, linguistic, and cultural practices of ethnic groups. What are they all about? And how dangerous in these positions are these minorities groups in China?
I think that what we have seen over the last, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, but certainly since 2014 and Xi Jinping sort of instituting a strike hard campaign, is a policy of sinicization, of attempting to try and standardize and have ethnic minorities and religious minorities conform to the expectations of the state. And obviously in Xinjiang and Tibet, the measures to enforce this have been really severe, and as we now know, the discussion is now in the international community: do these constitute crimes against the humanity or genocide or to that level. So this is the sort of conversation that I think is ongoing in the analysis of China's policy towards ethnic minorities.
Okay, Namrata, my question is that China has had a complex relationship with its minorities historically. Allegations on CCP and Chinese authorities that they don't treat other minorities group at par with the Han majority. So can we say that the racism exists in modern China? And how true these allegations, I mean the reports of the Amnesty International is?
Thank you for the question, Anurag. I think since the beginning, China had very complex relations, especially with its ethnic minorities. I'm not going very far, but if you look at the Qing dynasty itself, Qing dynasty came after overthrowing the Ming dynasty.
Right.
Now, after Qing dynasty, monarchy ended in China. But Qing dynasty was always looked at as outsiders because they were not Han Chinese, they were actually Manchus. It, of course, like Dr. Stroop has already said, that it has started intensifying under Xi Jinping. But, when I think Xi Jinping, he showed a lot of interest, especially when it came to the United Front work, and especially ethnic minority issues.
Sadia, if I ask you about the state of the minorities in China and CCP's behavior particularly, China is not only suppressing other ethnic minorities but also exerting dominance on other countries. So how do you see in totality this behavior of China?
Thank you for having me, sir. I do agree with David, sir, and Amrita Hasija, ma'am, but I would like to share my own inputs, like what I have been researching on. There is a transition of power happening globally. And you know that China is enjoying a kind of, upper hand at international institutions, especially United Nations. And there's a kind of division in the United Nations between the Western states and the non-Western states. So I would like to get into more specific when you were mentioning about religious policies or language policies. Let me decode in terms of that aspect. So if you see the kind of reform in this known as the second generation ethnic policy that was proposed by Mao Zedong, the famous Chinese scholar, and he actually talked about taking away the minority privileges and preferentialism and remove the distinctiveness. But if you apply that in the context of Xinjiang or Tibetan region, you see that they're taking away the legal significance and the distinctiveness from the minorities such as Uyghurs and Tibet. So if you if in terms of bilingual education, which was actually practiced in the 1990s and 2000, and now it has been actually shunned away, and the emphasization is on the taking Mandarin as the medium of instruction, that has legal significance repercussion because it is actually eradicating Uyghur language. It is attacking the ascriptive identity of the Uyghur people. It is actually eradicating religion and also cultural practices. So this is a kind of, an attack on or a gaslighting or an eradication of the Uyghur identity, religion.
Dr. Stroop, how these issues in Xinjiang and Tibet are viewed by the different players, including European perspective, and whether policies or the countermeasures can actually be formulated and, more importantly, implemented to put China under pressure on these related issues?
I think it's a difficult question to assess simply because there have been not that many countermeasures that are actually taken. The United States and the United Kingdom have both made statements about they consider what is happening in Xinjiang genocide. The United States did that in the sort of the final days of the Trump administration and has continued to press in the Biden administration and under those terms. We see some pushback from the EU. I think notably, one of the things that is instructive about how China may respond to push and pull is looking at what happened when a bunch of major multinational corporations, like clothing retailers, H&M, others, Adidas, I believe, although I could be wrong about that, tried to boycott Xinjiang produced cotton because they wanted to cut their supply chains out of potential forced labor concerns or, to be complicit in this situation. They didn't want to be seen as being complicit. And China responded very forcefully, stirring up sort of pro-patriotic sentiment on the Chinese internet and having a bunch of Chinese celebrities come out and forcefully defend products made from Xinjiang cotton and then call for boycotts of these Western companies. So this is indicative to me of the idea that there might be a sensitivity there, that China is sort of responsive, but they will perhaps respond defensively. And there is sort of a nationalistic and defensive response. And this may be even amplified if governments like the EU or if there are further actions from the US, the UK. I think we can expect to see sort of more of that kind of dynamic.
Okay. This is difficult to predict. Okay. But Sadia, if I ask you the same thing, I still remember at the time after taking oath as a US president, Joe Biden also, when he called first Xi Jinping, he raised the issue of the human rights violations and probably said that the China has to rectify or China has to improve on these terms as well. So especially the countries like US and some European nations are also saying it. But how do you see it? I mean, will these players put some kind of a pressure on China or not in coming days, months, and years, or not?
So I would actually say that, of course, the world is giving attention to the human rights abuses right now, but this is actually especially coming only from the Western states. You have to understand this. Okay, the non-Western states are not speaking about it, and the human rights abuses. Last year, European Parliament also actually raised alarm, and it wrote a letter to the High Representative talking about detailed human rights investigation, and then Britain, Canada, and the US, they also call this as a genocide. So it's a very big word or a term to use or accuse a country calling out for genocide. And now when the states are doing this, especially the Western states, because they find ample evidence and testimonies in the public domain that China is persecuting the Uyghur minorities, it is actually inflicting physical and mental torture to the Uyghurs.
Okay, my next question is that do you find any difference? I mean, you said that the relationship with the ethnic minorities have had very complex in mainland China. But what difference do you find of China, of its ethnic policies before Xi Jinping and now under his regime?
I think it's a very important question because, as I said, there were preferential policies for the minorities. Now, under Xi Jinping, what has happened is an aggressive assimilation policy has started. Now, most of these ethnic minority issues are handled by the United Front Work Department, and Xi Jinping he's had special interest in the United Front Work, and especially the ethnic minority issues. And in 2017, when he took over as the head of powerful central leading small group on the United Front Work. This exercises direct control over the formulation and implementation of policies for China's ethnic minorities. And since then, since 2017, after he's taken over this group, there has been a noticeable uptick in the United Front activity when it comes to the ethnic minorities.
Dr. David, so one can inarguably say that racism exists in modern China, and China has had a very complex and very tricky relationship with its minorities. I said that the riots and unrest have periodically flared up in various regions of the China. So my question is that, is it because of the dominance of the Han ethnic groups, or CCP's behavior is also responsible?
I think there will certainly be some attempt to for some people to put forward a boycott of the Olympics, or to continue to put pressure in regard to trade deals or economic deals to sort of divest from Xinjiang. For its part, the International Olympic Committee has been hesitant to make any kind of movement on this, and I think that possibly that is going to be their line. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of movement from the IOC about sort of relocating the Winter Olympic Games or anything like that. There might become increased pressure on major countries to boycott, like the United States did in 1980 against the Moscow Olympics, and the Soviet Union did in retaliation. We might see that kind of pressure. I don't know that there will be anything quite as organized as that. And this is because these are prestige events, and for a lot of countries, the idea of boycotting a prestige event like this is a major step. And I think, as Sadia has pointed out, as a lot of countries are unwilling to challenge China or do things that would upset China because of economic dealings, because of the prospect of future trade relations, there is a general sense that you have to kind of go along to get along to be a part of some of these deals. And so while we may see some pressure from activists and we may see some pressure from, in particular, sort of liberal democratic states, in especially Western states, we might not see a global effort.
Sadia, I was asking about the Chinese intention because I asked about the dominance of the Han community. So that may be the reason. But the Chinese government is also trying to project its image. And last month, Chinese government announced that it would use propaganda films to publicize its ethnic minorities group or various ethnic minorities group. And aim is to promote China as a multicultural, multi-ethnic country, and by doing so, increase soft power at home and abroad.
Quote that in that sense. There is always has been majoritarian nationalism and Han nationalism. With Xi Jinping coming to power, this has actually escalated a lot. He is actually using cultural nationalism in terms of patriotic education to instill kind of, forging a common consciousness, a common identity, which is equivalent to Han nationalism or Han majoritarian group. This was also evident under previous rulers such as Jiang Zemin or Mao Zedong or whatever. But Xi Jinping has escalated or exacerbated this phenomena. And if you talk about the propaganda, yes, China has been doing it, especially they have released a video quite recently talking about a scenic beauty in Xinjiang, referring that the development and the prosperity and the kind of peaceful situation in Xinjiang. So that is a kind of soft power promotion, again, from the Xi Jinping aspect. But what China is trying to do here is the propaganda is China just want to, believe the world that they are facing terrorism and the counter-terrorism measures are there to combat that. This is just one side of the story. The other side of the narrative, that the symbolic ethnic minority policies which were there in the 1990s, which could not actually yield positive results or bridge the gap between Han community and the Uyghur minorities, those things China does not want to be highlighted. And if there was an incident that like a reporter known as Ursula Gauthier, a French reporter, she was actually very critical of Xi Jinping's Chinese policies in Tibet and Xinjiang, and she was expelled from China just because of a critical reporting. So instances like this exist where China does not want this to get highlighted. It just wants to show that its own projected story, that it is on the path of development, be it in terms of human rights or be in terms of peaceful situation in Xinjiang. Yeah.
Namrata, will world community be ever in a position to put pressure on China or not, according to you?
You can also see an indication of that at least, like from Mao Zedong and even Deng Xiaoping era, they were kind of trying to, of course, not celebrate ethnicity, but at least accommodate them. And, and there has been a very significant change in that. Because on December 14, 2020, Chen Xiaoqiang, he was appointed as the head of National Ethnic Affairs Commission, and he's a Han by ethnicity. And this is the first time that a Han has been appointed as head of it. Since 1954, it had always been an ethnic minority who had headed this group, but now it is a Han that is heading this group. So you see substantial changes after Xi Jinping has come.
Okay, Namrata, thank you very much for joining and talking to Lok Sabha TV. On this note, I have to wrap up the show. Thank you to all my guests for joining me from London, from Taipei and from Delhi. Namrata, Dr. Stroop and Sadia, to all of you joining to and locking to Lok Sabha television. So news about ethnic minorities are not good from mainland China. They have created a dystopian hell space in the Xinjiang, and persecutions of the Uyghurs is quite evident. World community is probably waking up now against China. Recently, G7 group chided China on the same issue, and the Czech Senate passed a resolution calling on the government of Czechoslovakia to boycott the Winter Olympics, which are going to be held next year. They allege the massive violations of human rights and freedoms, genocide and crime against humanity and ethnic discrimination in China. So at the time when the world is still grappling with the COVID pandemic and the needle of suspicion is on China, how and when the world powerful nations tied the noose around China would determine the safety of these ethnic groups of mainland China, or probably the world might see the extermination of the Uyghurs and Tibetans in the future. That's all we have in this edition of Public Forum. Thank you very much for watching.